I want to thank these people for having me here at their beautiful, beautiful hotel. This used to be called the Leatherock Hotel, and now it is the Cherryvale Bed and Breakfast. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Jim.
Hi.
And I'm Shirley Ann Hogben, Jim's wife. I'm general manager, and
I'm the owner and chief cook, bottle washer, construction foreman, and gopher and builder.
I am so thrilled to be here. This is nice to walk into a building that is actually being restored. I go into a lot of buildings that are being just left to rot and doing a lot of urbex. You see a lot of buildings that you walk into and they're just, you think, oh, I wish somebody would just come in here and rebuild this, take care of it, bring it back up. They have a lot of potential. And I've been into houses, I go in and go back a year later and they'd be totally gone because the farmers would just burn them or knock them over. And it's like, no, why? But they all have their reasons. Would you like to give me some history on the hotel?
The hotel was built between 1911 and 1912 by an industrialist, and it's the only hotel left out of 14 that this community had. And the reason for so many is that we had an east-west railroad called the Frisco, when the depot was across the street from the hotel, and a north-south Santa Fe, which went from Kansas City to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we had the Union Electric, which went from Nowata, Oklahoma to Parsons, Kansas. At the peak of the business season of this town, there were 28 trains, 4 on the Frisco and 24 on the Santa Fe every single day. And that's passenger trains. Freight trains were an addition. And because the Frisco depot was right here across the street, the hotel was located here. It's the third one that was here. There was one called the Brown. That was the original one. It was real small. And they took that down and built one almost the same size as the Leatherock Hotel, but it was built out of wood, and that was the Exchange Hotel. And the railway era of transportation version of FedEx was across the street. It was called the Railway Express Agency. Some people know about them because they used to get packages of oranges and produce in the fall and at Christmas time. They'd be packed by a company called Mission Pack in California, and they'd come back Railway Express all over the United States. And the Santa Fe Depot is the second one, the original wooden one, built in the early 1800s, 1860, 1870, burned down. And so they built the depot that we have now, somewhere around 1909 to 1910. And this town has a number of exceptional statistics. One of them, we had the longest brick railroad platform in the world because it went all the way from the Frisco depot down the street to the Santa Fe depot and past the front of the Railway Express Agency. And the purpose of the hotel here was to have people who were getting off the east-west train and changing to the north-south train, and they'd stay overnight here at the hotel. And it was built by an industrialist, and that's the reason it's still standing. All the other hotels were built years before, and they were built mostly with balloon framing, which means if you dropped a dime from the attic, it would go all the way to the basement because there was long studs that went from the basement all the way to the rafters. And as a result, they were able to put wiring into buildings that never had wiring, but they didn't understand proper wiring practices, and so the wiring was usually overloaded, and eventually there'd be an electrical fire and the place would burn down. This place, being built by an industrialist, was actually built to today's standards. It had 12-gauge wire, 3-wire, and in the attic it was insulated 3-wire knob and tube. And in the ceiling of the first floor in the basement, which was a daylight basement where people also stayed, it was in water pipe conduit and stamped steel boxes. So state of the art, and there were on the main floor 26 circuits, and on some of the other circuits, other floors, branch circuits. So the place was wired in excess of the requirements of the era, and so here it is.
When you think about early electricity in a hotel, a room might have a light bulb in the center of the ceiling, and there might be a lamp, and that's it. But in a very short time, there were coffee pots and toasters and all kinds of goodies to plug in, and you get this little octopus that you could put all these plugs in. Well, couldn't handle the load, so these hotels burned down because of that, but this one is still standing. And you were saying that Jim was the right person to come and take care of this project, buying it as an abandoned building. And it was not an intentional thing. It was like, I don't think I want to do this. I've seen The Money Pit.
Yeah, I love that movie. I love that movie.
But when he was in the Army, and then he was in the Navy Reserves, and he was a construction electrician in the Navy Reserves, helping to build big, huge El Toro Marine Base, right?
Yep.
And
Wired aircraft hangars and things. So
wondering when would I ever use that? Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
So we've completely rewired and almost completely replumbed the entire building to government specs, because that's how I know how to do it. So it'll last another 100 years.
He went to City Hall to get a building permit or find out what he needed to do to work on this place. And when he gave them his background, they said, "Oh, well, you know more than anybody else in the area, so just go for it." So they understood. He knew he wasn't going to short anything, that's for sure. But he's done a great job. Something about doing a renovation that maybe most people don't understand. I want to have a really nice kitchen. Well, a nice kitchen involves a refrigerator, a dishwasher, a range, and cupboards with lots of stuff in them. And you think of all the weight that is. You can't just go in and put in new cupboards and new plumbing and electric. You have to, if we want to do something, it's usually 5 phases. And in my kitchen is probably 7 phases, because he had to had to start my kitchen in the basement because it had to be reinforced to hold all the weight. And we have a big dining hall, and it'll handle about 40 people, but you figure an average of 200 pounds a person, that's 8,000 pounds. And we have to make sure the floor will hold that many people. In the 1900s, people didn't weigh as much as we weigh today.
Because they weren't as big.
Yeah, they weren't as big. The beds were a lot smaller and all. So we have to think about all these things before we can. You can't just go do something. It has to start like 8 steps back before you can actually get to the project you want to do. And so it's
in here and in the dining hall. I've been working on restoring the tin ceilings, and we checked with a company that makes tin ceilings, and they said, right now, to their knowledge, this is the only building that has this particular style of tin ceilings.
There is a place in Nevada, Missouri that has all kinds of forms that, like the plates.
We talked to them about making some copies for us, and they said that in exchange for us authorizing them to copy our particular style, they would do all of the forms and everything for free and just charge us the standard stock rate for each of the panels. And that's the way we were going to go until I found, under a false ceiling, some almost perfect tin ceiling material. So there was a big hole back here in the ceiling from rust, from water coming through from the roof damage, and I replaced all of that and refurbished all the tin. And it's a 3-step process before you can even put the first coat of paint on there. First you have to convert the rust to metal, with a chemical, and then you have to prime it with metal primer. Then we prime it with peel stop primer, which bonds any paint that you can't get off. And then we use regular primer. Then we use 2 coats to 3 coats of paint. So it takes about 3 weeks to do just one section once you start on it.
You'll have to take pictures of that.
Yeah.
When Jim and his friend Wayne first lived here, the ceiling was all white and it was real pretty.
Where it wasn't rusted out.
And
Yeah.
they were sitting there and there's these flakes coming down and it's like it was
The
snowing.
ceiling had dandruff.
Yeah, the people that owned it before didn't know what they were doing, and so they sandblasted the paint off, the original paint, but they didn't take the oils off left from the
And the
sandblasting.
silicone from the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they just painted and they didn't prime it or do any of the steps that it takes to
So
do
as soon
that.
as we had heat in the winter and cold in the summer in here, the metal would expand and contract, all that paint started falling off. But
Yeah.
it took nearly 20 years for some of it to really start coming off. The rest of it would just come off in flakes. So that's why I started using the bonding primer on the part that I couldn't get off, to make sure it wouldn't come off later.
Yeah.
The building was abandoned when Jim bought it, and had been a number of years, and now we're about 80% restored on the first floor, and the basement is unto itself, but the second floor is about 20% done. So we have 80% on this floor and 20% upstairs.
Maybe more than 20%, because the 4 rooms that the model railroad group is in are done, and then our suite is probably 70% done.
Yeah. The Cherry Valley Model Railroad Group was meeting here, and the Santa Fe and Frisco were both bought out by the Burlington Northern, and so they didn't run any longer, so things were abandoned here. And took part of the depot, and the Model Railroad Group had their layout there, and the Main Street Association had the other half of the depot. Well, what's his name? The Watco.
Dick Webb.
Dick Webb, who started the Watco company, he had started doing a little short line business. And pretty soon that short line business got bigger, and pretty soon he needed the depot, so they had to move out. And it was about the time Jim bought the hotel, so he made a place for them here in the hotel. And so there's 4, he knocked out 4 rooms upstairs, and those 4 rooms is a layout that covers it's more of a diorama. It's huge, but it covers from Chanute, Kansas to Coffeyville, Kansas in the late 1970s, the way the Santa Fe, the Frisco, the MKT, and the Missouri Pacific used to run. And they interviewed people and went back in history and have all the buildings that were in business in the 70s and 80s. And they interviewed train engineers to get the route right and to run it in the same time frame as the way it would have run and how it would have done. So it's very realistic.
So the train layout is run by train orders, just the same as railroads run by train orders.
They're serious train players.
Yeah. Yes, there's people out there that are very serious about their trains.
Yeah.
Very serious.
So we have the Model Railroad Group upstairs, and then when we look outside, we have the SKOL, South Kansas and Oklahoma, which is part of the Watco family, and it's out of all of the short lines that the company owns, it's the most profitable.
So we get to see trains in 3 directions, north, south, east, west, and then back and forth between east and west and north.
Right. And the engineers look for us because when we hear the ding, 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 or I usually hear a rumbling or feel a rumbling, you can feel it coming, and we'll go out on the porch and wave, and they wave back. They look for us, and we always include a prayer for them when we go out there.
I remember when I was a kid, if there had been a train derailment, everybody would go and everybody would take pictures. And back then, they didn't think nothing of it. Us kids, my parents had pictures of us kids standing right next to these rollover cars. We never thought about it. What if one of them just kind of rolled a little farther at any moment? You never knew. Yeah. If one of them was just going to decide to just go on over, But thankfully, never anything like that ever happened to anybody. But, I remember
oblivious to the danger.
Yeah. Going and getting in the car and going to where the train rolled over and getting pictures and stuff. It was always a big deal, and watching everything.
It was with my parents too.
Yeah.
For some reason, but I've always loved trains.
Yeah.
I've always really loved trains. When Jim and I met, we met through eHarmony, and he was communicating with several women. That we finally got to a point where we would ask each other questions, and he asked me, first question, what do you think of trains? And so I wrote back, when I was 12, I rode the El Capitan from Los Angeles to Chicago by myself. And that gave me a
spike in the rating.
A spike in the rating, there it is.
And then I find out on our first Christmas that she has her own train set to go around the Christmas tree.
There you go.
Good pick.
Yeah, good pick. So, and Jim has owned his own large car.
I owned a railroad car at one time.
And at his home in Southern California, he had built a whole building just for a layout. But now it's been back here since part-time since 1996, and we moved here full-time in
2010.
2010. That's when we moved here full-time. Cherryvale is about 2,000 people, and in the early days, when all the trains were running, it was
about 7,000.
It was one of the largest cities in the state because of the trains. But the industry was here, and that's why the building is brick. Most everything was. Our streets are brick.
Yep.
And
there were.
I remember that when I first moved here, it was like
boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
There were 5 brick plants here, 2 glass bottling companies, a zinc plant, a lumber milling outfit that created door trim and doors and things like that was right next door.
A glass factory.
2 bottling companies, glass bottling companies.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of industry here. There was cattle loading down south of town.
And then the farmers.
And all the farmers. A grain elevator across the street. A fun story about that, when the newspapers wrote up the article that I was going to be restoring this place, one day there was a knock on the side door, and a man said, "Are you James Hogben?" And I was like, maybe. And he sticks his hand out and he says, "Hi, cousin." Turns out his grandmother was my great aunt. And so I had instant family in town. So that went a long ways towards smoothing lots of things over.
Yeah, because he was well known with a good reputation, and he has a sister, so he's got 2 cousins here that he didn't know that lived
like
here.
when I moved here, I thought, okay, I only knew the people that moved here before we did from New York. We worked at a place called Santa's Cottage. It was like a rescue place for animals. And we had both of our families worked there, and they moved out here first because their families from there, Bill Toothman and all them, lived here. And so they moved back down here, and then they said, well, you need to come out here and go to work at Amazon. So we came out here. And then I wasn't here more than a week, and my grandmother's on the phone. You know, you've got a cousin that lives in Parsons. How far is Parsons from you? And I'm like,
22
are you
miles.
kidding me? I'm like, you're kidding, right, Grams? No, they live in Parsons. I'm like, okay, I thought I moved way away from my family. I was like, but yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it is a small world, isn't it? So when Jim and I were matched from eHarmony, he was from Southern California, and I was living in Oregon, but I was from Southern California. We grew up about 30 minutes apart from each other. Our lives were crossing all these years without really meeting. Our high schools played each other. He'd go to the same movie theaters I went to. We went to the same restaurants, and we never met until it'll be 16
years.
16 years. But
17 years since we met.
Since we met. And so...
That's cool.
Yeah. And I've always loved big houses. We live in a really big house.
So this actually had 37 rooms.
37 rooms on 3 floors, with 1 bathroom on each floor, and still people in Europe, especially, that's the way things are.
Yeah, I know. I watch all the where they're going to go buy houses or rent houses in other countries. Can't remember the name of the shows, but it's been years. I don't have TV anymore, so I don't get to watch them. But and they're like looking at these places. Well, where's the bathroom? It's down the hall. Mm-hmm. And the people will be like, we have to share a bathroom with somebody. You know, it's like, you're not in America anymore, toots. You know, but yeah, a lot of the countries are still like that.
Jim had traveled to England and taken his son with him on how many? 3 months?
No, 30 days.
30-day pass.
We had a British rail pass for 30 days. So we went all over England, Scotland, and Wales, and stayed in bed and breakfast. And that's where I got the idea for turning this place into a bed and breakfast.
Well, you were actually looking for bed and breakfasts.
It turns out I was in her town one time with my friend Wayne, and we were looking for bed and breakfast in Oregon. That's where originally we were looking.
On the Oregon coast.
On the Oregon coast. And so...
our paths came real close, but we didn't meet.
Never met.
I was in real estate, and he picked a realtor, and that they didn't buy. They almost bought a property, but they were talking in front of the seller of all the improvements they'd make, and she loved their ideas so much that she's decided to keep it and do what they suggested.
And that's when we ended up coming back here. That was our last big hope. So after that, we said, well, maybe we'll look back in Kansas. You've got it. My friend had bought a couple of rentals, and so we came back here looking. We looked at Victorians, and they were just the ones that were in really good condition were too much money, and the ones that were not in really good condition looked like there was too much work.
Here we are.
Yes.
And here we are. So we have 3 rooms and 3 suites completed, but it's been 20 years, so we have to re-renovate after 20.
Time to remodel some of them.
Time to remodel on things, but each one has its own personality and its own theme. So we have a Route 66 suite, and then we have, because Jim and Wayne were on the board of the Route 66 Association in Southern California, and they'd made that trip back and forth from Chicago.
And what do we do with all the memorabilia? Well, when we finished the suite, we said, hey, so
there we go.
There we go.
And we're, 46 miles from the Kansas Route 66? So there is a Kansas Route 66.
Yes, I traveled it quite a bit quite a bit of the one in Kansas, and quite a bit of it in Missouri down it. I do have a couple of videos of it, but there's parts of it you have to. It doesn't even say it's the old Route 66. You really have to look at the map and figure it out, and figure out exactly where did it go again. You know, because it kind of hides on you.
Most people don't know it, but Route 66 had a lot of reconfigurations in small towns and big cities alike. Los Angeles area had 3 different routings for Route 66, and between Riverton and Galena and Kansas, there were 2 or 3 different routings too. So
Yep. Got really confused coming through there. I've got some really good video through there, and I think it was a Galena, that there was a Riverton Galena area. There's like a biker kind of bar, and we had pulled over at where the bike is by the road, the ghost bike. We pulled over, and I was doing a video there, and the bikers are coming through, and I was like waving. So they were all like in my video, and they were all like, "Hi!" And I was like, "This is so cool." But yeah, I love getting out, and just whatever happens, and that's the way I like to do my videos. Whatever I get, I get. I don't go out all the time looking for a specific thing, because I like to have things to go with a natural flow sometimes, because you never know what you're going to see. I might walk out one morning. Well, the moon was up at like 4:30 in the morning when I was doing laundry one morning. Oh, look, that's pretty, and it's in the east, everybody. Look at that. And the sun's coming up with it, The moon's rising with the sun, so I did a quick little video of it, and it's just...
Our other 2 suites that we have, one is the Santa Fe, and it's dedicated to the Santa Fe Railroad and the Santa Fe Indians. And there's a picture on the wall in the room, and that's where you're staying, that shows the
turquoise room.
The turquoise room.
Yes,
and
I've seen that.
When Jim was a little boy, that train that had that car on it used to come through Pasadena, and he would go down with his folks and watch that train, because that's the train that the movie stars would get on and off. And he used to say, "Someday I want to see the inside of that." And so on our first anniversary, we did an excursion train in Oregon that went up from Eugene to, Tillamook, I think. Mm-hmm. And when we arrived to take the ride, they sent us to go get in line, and we looked at that car and we got on. It was that car. It wasn't a replica. It was that car he had seen as a little boy that he wished he could ride on. And we got to ride on that car and sit in the lounge, and then go up to the turquoise room and sit, and then they had a dome car. It was all part of one car. And it was just really great. We met 6 or 7 really cool people, and then this young man came in, and there was a coffee table in the lounge, and Jim was thumbing through it, and there were trains that were in the...
Pictures.
Yeah, like a photo album. And he started talking to Jim, and the young man said, "You should meet my dad. He's the owner of the train." So next thing you know, Dad walks in, and he says, "Hi, Jim." They knew each other.
Because we'd gone to private railroad car owners conventions, and the car that my friend Wayne and I were restoring was the sister car to the one that he had restored. So he gave us free rein to go through and take pictures, so that we'd have an idea of what we might do when we restored the car.
Yeah.
And because my friend got to be in poor health, we never finished. And now that car is a brew tasting pub in Arizona. So
yeah, it was it was being restored in Southern California, and then when they bought the hotel here,
we brought it back here to restore it.
And
unfortunately went through some baseball and quarter and 50-cent size hailstorms, and it damaged the roof, so after repairing it twice between storms, we kind of knew it was time to let go of it and go to Arizona where there's no hailstorms.
Right.
We hope. There shouldn't be.
Not in the
Arizona.
Not in the desert. But,
The way things are half the time, we have to wonder what's going to happen. You know, the weather has been so crazy. That's like, you know, in upstate New York, we were like, oh, there's never tornadoes. And I kept looking one day, and the sky was breathing. I kept saying, that's weird, because those clouds are literally like they're breathing. I said, we need to go home. Let's get home. This isn't right. That's not normal. They were like low, and you could just see them going like this and go back up, and came across the radio that there was tornado warnings. Everybody was like laughing. We don't get tornadoes in upstate New York. That's for out west. Half an hour later, we had tornadoes go through like you would not believe. Destroyed homes. People died because people didn't listen. People said, oh, that's a joke. And they've had tornadoes quite regularly since.
wow.
But, yeah.
Yeah, the weather has changed quite a bit.
Part of that is because of the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. I read that it actually shifted the Earth's axis some, and so the weather's a little different everywhere.
Yeah.
That was a really, really big earthquake.
Yeah. And living in Southern California, we experienced a few of those, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And tornadoes too.
This.
A lot of people think there's no tornadoes in California.
I was in a high-rise in North Hollywood, an all-glass building, and one of the girls that I was working with said, you see this cloud here and you see this here? You know, if I were in Kansas, that'd be a tornado. And about 30 minutes later, across the street from where we were, took the whole roof off of the whole building.
Yeah.
And it could have been us, but we were a tall high-rise for that area, and we were okay. But totally unexpected. But yeah, this hotel we've never had one tornado touch down in this community. There's something about the
They say it sits in like a bowl. Butler is the same way. They say the way it sits, they just kind of barely miss it. Goes all the way around it, and they just...
Same thing here.
Yeah.
Same thing here. So we're thankful because we're still here.
Yeah.
And that rain can come pretty hard and pretty quick.
Yeah.
The basement just laps it up.
In 2007, this town was an island.
We were an island. There was such a storm.
Was I here? No, I think I'd already moved by then. I left here in 2006.
You left at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I really have enjoyed
Me
reminiscing
too.
and talking with you. This has been fun.
Yep. Well, I probably won't get this up until I get back home, but I am going to take some pictures of these beautiful tiles. I'll probably do, before I leave, I'll pan up to these ceilings. And if you don't mind me showing that beautiful stairway, just a shot of the stairway. Not go up it, but just a shot. That's going to be gorgeous.
And not the foyer, because we're still remodeling it.
Yeah.
We're starting the improvement with the ceiling upstairs and working our way downstairs to finish it so that...
It is gorgeous. I just so glad. I mean, I remember driving by this all the time. And back then, I mean, my grandmother used to take me into old houses all the time. She's the one that got me hooked on it. And I never dreamed I would have a YouTube channel based on abandoned places.
Wow.
Never dreamed on it. But, you know, I was like 10, 11 years old, and she used to say, look at that old house. Let's go see what's in there. And she'd pull around the back of it in her old Studebaker, and we'd get out and go.
Check it out.
Oh, we'd go in and check it out and look around, and she's the one that got me started years ago. back when I was a kid.
That's fun.
So, and old houses have always fascinated me. Always been, I wonder what it looks like inside of there.
Well, we had our third date. I flew back to Kansas, and I flew into Kansas City. And the funny thing, you experienced driving here from that area. I had GPS, but it didn't work because there weren't any transmission. I just had to figure, don't get off the highway, I'll get there kind of thing.
Yeah. I
But
just told her, get on 169 and get off when you get to Cherryvale.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yep. It had been so long since I've been out here. I was kind of like, okay, now which roads and street do I take to get to Big Hill? How did I do that again? I was like, really? But yeah.
So this is your first time back in a long time.
in a long time, probably about 8 years.
Wow, that's
I
great.
think I came out here 8 or 10 years ago. Once. That's how long it's been. So it's been a while. But yeah. So, well, I thank you so much for the interview, and the rooms are gorgeous. You guys have just done such a beautiful job, and it is hard to take on a restoration this big. And
We
it's
figured
just-
out one day, we said, how come we don't seem to make more progress than some people on these TV shows that we watch? And we figured it out and did the division of the square footage. We're like restoring 8 standard houses here all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That puts it in perspective. Like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Yes, we're doing it. And we're doing it debt free. So it's
Yes.
as the money comes, that's how we do things. If we don't have the cash, it waits.
Yep, exactly.
We put a Band-Aid on it and wait a while. And then,
Yep.
but
And a lot of people wouldn't. They would go into debt and go all in, and then where's the enjoyment? Because then you've got that, I got to make this payment, you know. I keep saying I want to get a place of my own, but then I'm like, then I have that payment, and I don't want to do that. You know, if I want to find a little piece of property somewhere, build me a little tiny shack on it. If that's all I can afford, that's all I can afford, you know? So,
we were both in real estate, so we know. Jim bought homes to renovate and turn over, so he knew about renovations.
I was
This
doing
wasn't his
flipping
first.
before there was a name for it.
Yeah, he
Yep.
was flipping properties before it had a name, but
yeah.
and he did almost all the repairs himself,
Yep.
like he's doing on here. So when we got married, I really needed a handyman to take care of a lot of my projects, and he was the man.
Did your honey-do list grow really rapidly?
Really grew, yes. Yes. It was like kudzu.
It's great to be in Kansas. We really love it here. We really do. We don't mind. Wichita is a nice sized city to go visit, but we're just not big city people, even though we've come
I'm
from
not
big
either.
cities.
I like being just south of Kansas, or Kansas City, like I am. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, but you live close. I'm like, Butler's not that big. You know, I can kind of hide in my little apartment and close the shades, and nobody knows I'm there. So,
Well, everybody knows we're here.
but
Oh,
well, thank you so much for this opportunity and for doing this interview and getting to see this and coming back to life. I remember when it had no, you know,
the windows were missing. And
yeah,
it
I
was
remember when
abandoned.
it was still very little. I remember it was, I kept looking at it and driving by and like, this is so beautiful. And there was so many other places, and I'm like, there's a lot of places gone that used to be here
Yeah.
just over the past 10 years. And I'm like, where did that go? Wait a minute, there was, and I'm like, I'm lost. the landmarks I used to go by are gone. I'm lost. So and there used to be another big church, I think, but it seems like there was another big brick church.
The Methodist church, but it's not on Main Street. It's off a block or two, and it's historic. It's a beautiful place with stained glass and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
Thank you so much for. I'm so glad you called. This is.
I was looking for something to do, and I wanted to come out to the zoo and stuff, and I've been waiting for things to open back up, and then I got to work for the census starting the end of July, so I kind of was trying to fit things in.
You bet.
So,
Good for
We
you.
found a lot of people with cabin fever have been waiting to get out. We've gotten several calls of people that didn't want to go too far, but they wanted to get away. And,
yeah.
And we meet the nicest people. We really do.
People from Germany, Australia, Sweden,
Vietnam,
Vietnam,
China.
Korea, China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had guests from all over the world, but from friends in Washington and that weren't friends because they came to here. And
Yeah.
We have some people that come back 3 or 4 times in a couple of years, just because they like it here, and they tease us that we better have done something since we were here last. We want to see some progress.
We'll keep coming back, and we'll do more progress.
That's what we tell them.
Yeah, when we get some more things done, we'll invite you back and
Yep.
do a tour.
All
That'd be
right.
great.
So,
Thank you so much.
thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end this, and thank you guys again for inviting me and for the beautiful room. I'm going to go ahead and end this video. Thank you guys for having me, and I will talk to everybody soon.